We were 3 days late to the Varn watchtower, and I had already decided before I ever saw it that there would be no one alive inside it. I had decided it the way an officer decides things he does not want to be true, coldly, to get ahead of the grief. The last relief had gone up to that tower 7 winters before mine, and the man they left there had been past 60 even then. No supply column had reached the upper Varn since the river bridge went out 2 years ago. No bird, no rider, no smoke had come down from it. When the quartermaster handed me the route and saw my face, he had only said, "Go and bring the post home. Bring the man home if you can. Bring his name home if you cannot." That last clause is how the service tells you a man is dead without making you say it. So we went up into the white, 8 of us and 4 mules, into a winter that did not so much fall as lean on the whole world. And I want you to understand the country, because the country is half the story. The upper Varn is not a place men are sent to be rewarded. It is the last shoulder of the kingdom before the kingdom simply stops being, a long bare spine of rock and snow above the tree line, where the wind comes off the ice fields with nothing in the world to break it, and the only thing standing for 40 miles in any direction is a single stone tower the old kings raised to watch a pass that no enemy has used in 100 years. The pass is not watched anymore for the enemy. It is watched because we said we would watch it. That is the whole of the reason. There is no other. By the second day my youngest, a signaller named Pell who had never been above the snow line, asked me why we kept a post that guarded nothing. I told him the truth, which is that a kingdom is not the land and is not even the people. A kingdom is a set of promises, and a promise you keep only when it is convenient is not a promise. It is a mood. The Varn Tower is a promise the realm made to itself a long time ago and has simply never taken back. Pell did not look satisfied with that, the way the young never are, and I let him be unsatisfied. The mountain teaches better than I do. On the 3rd evening, we came up the last switchback in a light that had gone the color of pewter, and I saw the tower against the dying sky, and I stopped the column in the snow without meaning to. There was a lamp burning in the high window. I have led men for 19 years, and I am not a fanciful person, but I will tell you that the back of my neck went cold in a way the wind had nothing to do with, because a lamp in that window meant one of 2 things, and I could not say which frightened me more. Either someone had reached the tower before us, and no one should have been able to, or the man we had come to bury was, against every reasonable expectation, still keeping his light. "Form up," I said very quietly, because some part of me felt that we were arriving somewhere that asked to be approached quietly. We go up together. Pell, the lamp stays lit the whole way. I want him to see us coming. We climbed the last 1/4 mile to that small warm square of light, and the closer we got the stranger it became, because the snow around the base of the tower was not untouched. There was a path, a single narrow track, packed hard by the same boots walked over and over, leading out from the tower door, around the western side, to a low place against the wall where the snow had been cleared down to the bare frozen ground in a careful rectangle. 8 rectangles. I counted them as we passed, and I did not understand them yet, and I am glad I did not, because if I had understood them at the foot of the tower, I would not have had the composure to climb the stairs. The door was barred from the inside. I knocked the formal 3, the relief knock that every man in the service knows in his bones, and from somewhere above us, a voice came down the stair, old and dry, and entirely unsurprised, as though we were not 3 days late but precisely, eternally on time. "Up you come, then," it said. "Mind the 4th step, it's gone soft." I have turned that sentence over 1,000 times since. Mind the 4th step. A man alone above the snow line for 7 years, hearing the relief knock at last, and the first thing out of him is not joy, is not weeping, is not even his own name. It is a small practical kindness about a rotten stare, offered to strangers he cannot yet see, because looking out for the next man up is so deep in him that it comes before everything else, before even his own rescue. We minded the 4th step. We came up into the watch room at the top, and I saw him. He was very old and very thin and perfectly upright, standing at his window the way I imagine he had stood at it for the better part of a lifetime, with the lamp beside him and his hands folded at the small of his back in the old parade rest. His uniform was a relic, a pattern the service had stopped issuing before I was born, but it was brushed, and the brass was bright, and the boots were blacked, up here where there was not one living soul to see it. That is the detail I cannot get past, even now. There was no one to inspect him. There had been no one to inspect him for 7 years, and he had blacked his boots. "Sergeant Aldous Crane," he said, and came to attention and saluted me, and his hand did not shake. "Tower Varn, the post is held, sir. The post has been held." I returned the salute. I could not have spoken if the kingdom had depended on it. We got the fire up and got food into him. Though he ate like a man who had forgotten food was a pleasure, and remembered only that it was a duty. We were soldiers, and we did what soldiers do. We filled the room with our noise and our warmth and our being alive, because we could feel, all of us, how much silence that one man had been holding, and we wanted to take some of the weight of it off him before we even knew what it was. And while the others worked, I stood at his window where he had stood, and I looked out at what he had been watching, and below in the last gray light I saw the rectangles in the snow again, cleared down to the bare ground, 8 of them in a careful row against the western wall. "Sergeant," I said, "what are those below against the wall?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he answered, his voice had changed. It had the particular evenness of a man who has said a thing only to himself for a very long time, and is afraid that saying it aloud will break it. "Those," he said, "are the 8. I keep them clear. The snow tries to take them every day, and every day I take them back. It is the better part of what I do here now. It is the watch the snow never ends." I did not understand him yet, but I was about to, and I have never been the same since. He did not tell me that first night. He told me across 4 nights, in pieces, the way a man pays out a long rope he is afraid to let go of all at once, and I will give it to you in order, because the order is how he kept his sanity, and I will not improve on it by hurrying. There had been 9 of them once. A full watch detail, the last that the realm ever sent up to Varn in proper strength, in a winter so long ago that the kingdom's borders were drawn differently, and the very name of the reigning house has since changed. 9 men and a sergeant, and the sergeant was a man named Hewell, whom Crane spoke of the way you speak of a father, and Crane himself was the youngest of them, a signaller no older than my pal, sent up to learn the post from men who had held it 20 years. "We were not soldiers as you mean it," he told me the second night, turning his cup in his hands. "There was no enemy. There has not been an enemy at that pass since the old wars, and those are stories even to me. We were keepers. You understand the difference. A soldier waits for a thing to happen. A keeper waits so that a thing does not have to. We kept the light, and we kept the road clear as far as the markers, and we kept each other, because 9 men in a stone box above the snow line keep each other, or they do not survive the keeping. That was the post. It does not sound like much. It is everything." I asked him, as gently as I could, what had happened to the other 8. He was quiet a long time. Then he said the thing I have carried down off that mountain, and will carry to my own grave. "The winter took them," he said. "Not all at once. That is the part people would not understand if there were any people left to understand it. They imagine a single terrible night, a single disaster, and then it is over and the survivor mourns once and is done. It was not like that. It was 30 years. And he told me, there had been a winter like a living thing, he said, a winter that did not want them on its mountain, and a supply column that did not come, and a decision Sergeant Hewell made that no man should ever have to make, which was to send 4 of the strongest down through the pass on foot to bring help, because to stay was to starve and to go was to gamble. The 4 went down into the white. They did not come back. 2 more went after them in the spring, when the snow gave a little, to find them or their bodies, and to carry the names down to the realm if they could carry nothing else. Those two did not come back either. And so it went, not in one blow but in the slow arithmetic of that place. A man lost to the cold, a man lost to the long sickness that the high country breeds in lungs, a man who simply lay down one gray afternoon and did not get up, his heart worn through at last by 40 years of altitude and duty. Huel himself went in the end, the old sergeant in his sleep, with his boots by the fire and his hand on Crane's shoulder, the last words a quiet instruction about the morning's light. 8 men, across 30 years, and at the end of the arithmetic there was one signaller, no longer young, alone in a stone tower above the snow line, with a post he had been taught to keep, and no one left in all the world to keep it with him, and no order ever, telling him whether to stay. "You could have come down," I said. It was not an accusation. I wanted, I think, to give him the permission no one had ever given him. After Huel, the post served no purpose any longer. No one would have called it desertion. No one would have called it anything but sense. You could have come down off this mountain 20 years ago and lived the rest of your life in a warm town, and no man living would have thought one word against you. "I know it," he said. "I have known it every single day." "Then why?" And he turned and looked at me, and I have been looked at by generals and by frightened men and by my own father on his last day, and I have never been looked at like that, with so much patience and so little self-pity, as though I had asked the one question whose answer was so simple it was almost unkind to make him say it. "Because they are still up here," he said, "and a watch is not a place you stand. It is a thing you owe. I did not owe it to the pass. I told you the pass guards nothing now. I owed it to them, to the 8. They did not stop being mine because they stopped breathing. Huel did not stop being my sergeant the morning he went cold. The dead are not discharged, sir. There is no paper for it. And if there is no paper discharging them, then there is no paper discharging me from them. So I stayed. I kept the light burning because Huel taught me that the light is the promise the realm makes to the lost, that as long as it burns, someone is still watching for you to come home. I keep it for the 4 who went down the pass, in case the mountain ever gives them back. And I keep the 8 clear of the snow every day all winter, because the snow would bury them, and the snow does not get to have the last word. Not while I can lift a shovel. That is the watch. The snow never ends. It does not end because they do not end. They are mine until I am one of them, and then I will be somebody's, and the light will go to whoever comes after. I went to my blanket that night and I did not sleep, and across the room I could hear the old man breathing, slow and even, a man entirely at peace inside a faithfulness that should by every law of the human heart have driven him mad, and had instead somehow made him the most undivided person I have ever known. In the morning I went out before the others woke, into a dawn so cold the air felt like glass, and I walked the narrow track he had packed around the western wall, and I stood before the 8 clear rectangles, and for the first time I let myself read them properly. There were no stones, no markers, nothing carved. Up here the wind would have scoured a name off granite in a decade, but at the head of each one he had set a single small thing pressed into the frozen ground. A brass button, a clasp knife with a bone handle, a regimental whistle, green with verdigris, a folded square of oilcloth that had once been a letter and was now only the memory of a letter. 8 small objects, one to a grave, the last things each man had carried, laid out so that the keeper would know whose ground he was clearing even after the names had gone from the world. And as I stood there the door behind me opened, and Crane came out into the dawn with his shovel, the way he had come out every single morning for 30 winters, and without a word he began to do what he did, lifting the night's snow off the first of the 8, careful as a man tucking in a sleeping family, and I understood that I was watching the truest act of soldiering I would ever see, and that it had been performed every day, faithfully, perfectly, by a man who believed with his whole soul that no one would ever come, and who did it anyway. That was when I knew that bringing him home was not going to be the simple thing the quartermaster had imagined, because I was beginning to understand that this man could not be ordered off his mountain. He could only be relieved of it. And relief is a different thing entirely, and a harder one, and I was not at all sure I knew how to give it. I will tell you what I did wrong first, because I owe him that. On the third day, I made the officer's mistake. I came to him after the morning's clearing, with the warmth of a fed fire and a good plan behind me, and I told him the sensible thing, that the post had no military value and had not had any in living memory, that the realm could not, in good conscience, maintain a tower above the snow line for one aging man to keep a private vigil, that he had done his duty and more than his duty, that no soldier in the history of the service had done as much, and that he was now ordered, and I leaned on the word, I am ashamed to say, I used the weight of my commission, ordered to stand down, come off the mountain, and let the dead be left in the keeping of the realm that would, of course, see them properly remembered. He listened to all of it with great courtesy, and when I had finished he asked me one question, very quietly. Remembered how, sir? And I had no answer, because we both knew the truth, and the truth was that the realm would not remember them at all. There would be no monument 40 miles above the tree line. There would be a line in a ledger, a closing of an account, a tower struck from the rolls. The 8 in the snow would become, within a single generation, 8 men who had once been somewhere, and then nothing. And the snow would come and take the rectangles back the very first winter after he left. And within 5 years, there would be no track in the snow, and no path packed hard by faithful boots, and no clear ground, and no brass buttons set at the head of each man. Only the smooth, white indifference of a mountain that had finally won. The realm will see them remembered, I said again, and I heard how thin it was even as I said it. No, sir, he said without heat, the way you correct a man you have decided to be kind to. The realm will see them filed. Those are not the same. I do not say it against the realm. The realm is large and the 8 are small and far away, and a large thing cannot keep faith with every small thing. That is simply true, that is the arithmetic again. But a man can. That is what a man is for. A man is the realm made small enough to keep an actual promise. You cannot order me to stop being that. You can carry me down the mountain. I am old, 8 of you could do it, and I would not fight you. I have never raised my hand against a man in my life. But you would be carrying down a man who had broken faith, and you would have to live with having made me into one. And I do not think, sir, looking at you, that you want that on your account any more than I want it on mine. I went out into the cold and I stood a long time looking at the pass, the empty pass that guards nothing, and I understood at last that I had come up the mountain thinking I was the one bringing rescue, and that I had been wrong in the most complete way a man can be wrong. He did not need to be rescued. He had not been waiting, in any sense, to be saved. He had made his peace with dying alone at his post 30 years ago and had spent every day since simply keeping faith, and the only thing my arrival had actually changed was that now, for the first time, somebody else knew. The vigil had been witnessed, and it came to me, standing there in that glass-gold air, that being witnessed was not nothing, that it might in fact be the whole of what the dead are owed, not rescue, which they are past, but a witness who is not. And then I understood what relief actually meant, and it was not what the quartermaster had sent me to do, and it was better. I went back in. The old man was at his window in the parade rest, watching the light. Sergeant Crane, I said, I withdraw the order. I had no business giving it. I gave it because it was the answer that let me go home easy, and that is a coward's reason, and I am sorry for it. Something moved in his old face, very slightly. But I will not leave you up here to die alone, I went on, because that is not relief either. That is just walking away and calling it respect. So I am going to offer you the only thing I have that is worth offering. I am going to relieve your watch, properly, the way Huel would have done it if Huel had ever had anyone to do it for him. He did not understand me yet, I told him. I had 8 men, I said, and a signaller and 4 mules and 3 weeks of provisions, and orders that gave me a free hand to do whatever the post required. The post, I had now decided, required a relief in proper strength. We would not strike the tower from the rolls. We would not file the 8. We would do, for those 8 men and for him, the one thing the service does that the snow cannot undo, the thing soldiers have done for their dead since there have been soldiers, which is to muster and to name them, and to stand for them with the full weight of the living behind us, so that the act of remembering was witnessed not by one failing old man but by a body of the realm's soldiers formally on the record, in the place where they fell. You have kept this watch alone for 30 years, I said. You will not stand the last one alone, we will stand it with you. And then it will be in the record that 9 men of the service mustered above the snow line and rendered the 8 of Tower Varn their full honors, and that record does not melt, Sergeant. The snow does not get the record. That is what I can give them that you could not, alone. Not because I am better than you, because there are 9 of me. He was quiet for so long I thought I had failed. And then the old man, who had not wept telling me how each of his friends had died, who had blacked his boots for 7 years with no one to see, put one trembling hand over his eyes, and I saw what it costs a man to be relieved of a weight he has decided to carry to his grave, that it is harder, sometimes, to be helped than to suffer, and that the strongest men feel it the worst. I had stopped, he said when he could speak, letting myself imagine it, that anyone would ever come. I told myself the wanting of it was a weakness, and I trained myself out of the wanting the way you train yourself out of fear. And now you are here, and I find I had not trained it out. I had only buried it, like the 8. He took his hand away and stood up straight, and the soldier was back in him, and he said, "When, sir?" "Tomorrow," I said. "First light, the best light there is. We will give them the morning." And we set about that night, the strangest and finest preparation of my life, 9 soldiers in a stone tower above the snow line, by lamplight, preparing to bury men who had been dead for 30 years and had never once been put to rest. The thing I had not reckoned on was the names. I had it in my head, you see, as a ceremony, a form, a thing with steps, a drill we would perform correctly and feel moved by and remember always. It was Pell, my young signaller, the one who had asked me on the 2nd day why we kept a post that guarded nothing, who showed me it was something else entirely. Late that night I found him sitting close beside the old sergeant, and he had his signaller's field book open on his knee, and a pencil, and he was writing. I came near and I heard what he was doing, and I stopped and did not interrupt, and the others one by one stopped too, until the whole room was still and only the 2 voices went on. Pell was taking down the 8, not their ranks. Not the dates, which Crane could only half remember anyway, the years having run together up there into one long winter. He was taking down the men. He was asking the old sergeant, gently, one at a time, who they had been, and Crane was telling him, and the boy was writing it all down so that it would exist somewhere other than inside one failing head above the snow line. There was Hewell, the sergeant, who had a laugh you could hear through stone, and who carried a flat tin of pear drops his whole life, and rationed them out a single sweet at a time to whichever man was lowest that day, so that to be given a pear drop was to be told, without words, that someone had seen you were struggling and meant to carry you. There was a big, slow, gentle man named Orrin who could mend anything, and once spent a whole month of evenings building, out of scrap, a music box for no reason at all, except that the winter was hard, and a music box is a small argument against despair. There was a young one, Tassel they called him, barely older than Pell, who could not sing a true note to save his life and sang anyway, constantly, terribly, and whom the others mocked without mercy and missed, Crane said, more than any of them, because a tower with no bad singing in it is a very quiet place. There was a man who had a wife and a daughter down in the world, and read their letters aloud at the fire until the others knew the daughter's small doings as well as their own, and grieved her father's not coming home almost as their own when his turn came. One by one, the old sergeant gave them up to the boy's pencil, and one by one they came back into the room, not as the eight, not as the lost, but as men, particular, foolish, beloved, real. And I watched the thing I had planned as a ceremony become, instead, a homecoming. Because that is what the dead want, I think, if the dead want anything, not to be honored in the abstract, not a form correctly performed, to be known. To have it be true somewhere that they were here, that they were like this and not like that, that they laughed so and rationed sweets so and sang so badly, and that it mattered, and that it was written down. Crane had kept their ground clear of snow for 30 years, and it had nearly broken him to do it alone. But he had been keeping the smaller thing. He had been keeping the graves. What he could not do alone, what no single man can do, because memory needs more than one head or it dies when the head dies, was keep the men. That took a second voice and a third. That took the realm, even a tiny piece of it, even 9 cold soldiers in a stone box agreeing together. These were real, and we will not let it be as though they were not. When Pell closed his field book that night, he had 11 pages, and he held it the way you hold something you have understood is holy, and he said to me, very low, "Sir, I was wrong. About the post. It doesn't guard nothing. It guards them." And I told him that was the most soldierly thing anyone in my command had ever said, and I meant it, and I mean it now. We were up before the dark had finished lifting. The morning came on clear. The mountain, which had fought that old man for 30 years, gave us a flawless dawn, still and pink and so cold the snow squeaked underfoot, as though it had decided, having lost, to lose gracefully. We formed up along the western wall, the 8 cleared rectangles before us, and I will not pretend it was a grand thing to look at. 9 men in worn winter gear, breath smoking, a single old sergeant in a uniform 40 years out of pattern with his brass like fire in the new light. No band, no banners, no realm watching. The smallest honor guard the service ever mustered, in the loneliest place it ever stood, for the longest overdue duty it ever performed. It was the finest thing I have ever been part of, and I have stood guard at a coronation. I gave Pell the field book and told him to read. And the boy, 19, 4 months in the service, who had never seen a man buried in his life, stood at the head of that line of graves above the snow line and read out the 8, not by rank and number, but as Crane had given them and as he had written them. He read Hewell and the pear drops. He read Orrin and the music box built against despair. He read Tassel, who could not sing and sang anyway. He read the man whose daughter's small doings we all now knew. He read all 8, the whole of them, the foolishness and the love and the particular small braveries, and as he read them the old sergeant stood at attention beside me with the tears running freely down his face and not one tremor in his frame, weeping and unbroken at once, which I had not known a man could be until that morning. And when Pell had read the last of them, I gave the only order I have ever given that I am wholly certain was right. "Present," I said. "Arms." And 9 soldiers above the snow line in the pink of the morning rendered the 8 of Tower Varn the full honors of the service. The honors they had been owed for 30 years and had never once received, and held them, while the wind came off the ice fields with nothing in the world to break it and did not, that once, touch the cleared ground. We came down the mountain 4 days later, all 10 of us, because Sergeant Aldous Crane came with us. I want to be careful about how I tell this, because it would be easy to make it sweeter than it was, and he would not forgive me for that. He did not skip down the switchbacks a free, enlightened man. Coming off a thing you have carried for 30 years is not like setting down a pack. You feel the place where the weight was for the rest of your life, and sometimes the absence is heavier than the weight had been. He stopped the first morning on the last shoulder where the tower passed out of sight behind us, and he stood a long time, and I let him, and none of us hurried him. Then he turned and came on. He did not look back again. I have always thought that took more than the staying had. But here is the thing I did not expect, the thing that is the real end of the story. He was not, on the way down, a man who had been finally allowed to put down a duty. He was a man who had been given a new one, and it had brought him back to life, because the 8 were no longer only his now. That was what we had actually done up there. Not laid them to rest exactly, but spread the weight of them, so that it was no longer one old man against a mountain, but 10 of us against the forgetting, and 10 can do what one cannot. 10 can come down off the mountain and carry the names into the world. 10 can make sure the record does not melt. We did make the record. I wrote it myself, and I wrote it carefully, and I made certain it could not be quietly filed and lost. 9 men of the service, it says, mustered above the snow line at Tower Varn, and rendered full honors to the 8 who held that post unto death across 30 winters. The last of them kept faithful by Sergeant Aldous Crane, who stood his watch alone for half his life and broke faith not once. And Pell's 11 pages went into the record with it, the pear drops and the music box and the bad singing and the daughter's small doings, all of it, because I had learned by then that the honors are the form but the names are the thing, and a remembering that keeps the form and loses the names has kept the wrapping and thrown away the gift. Crane lived 4 more years. He spent them, to my lasting astonishment, teaching. The service has a school for its young keepers, the men it sends to its lonely posts, the towers and the tombs and the far frontier watches, and someone had the great good sense to bring the old sergeant to it, and he stood in front of boys no older than Pell and told them what a watch actually is. I went to hear him once. He did not talk about the cold or the danger or the loneliness, which is what the boys expected and half wanted. He talked about the 8. He told them about Hewell and the pear drops. And then he said a thing to those young keepers that I have repeated to every man I have commanded since, and will repeat to you now, because it is the whole of what I brought down off that mountain, and it is worth more than I can say. They will tell you, he said, that you are sent to guard the post. That is not true, and the sooner you know it is not true, the better keeper you will be. The post does not need guarding. The post is stone. It will outlast you whether you stand at it or not. You are not sent to guard the post. You are sent to be the proof that the realm keeps faith. That is all a keeper is. You are the realm made small enough to keep an actual promise to actual men. And the promise is this, that no one who stands for us will ever be left to stand alone in life or after it. That as long as one of us can lift a shovel, the snow does not get the last word. That we come for our own, even 30 years late, even when there is no military reason and no one watching and no profit in it at all, because keeping faith when there is no profit in it is the only kind of faith there is. The rest is just standing in a cold place. Anyone can stand in a cold place. Be the proof, that is the watch. There is no discharge from it, and you would not want one if there were. He died in the spring, the way Hewell had, quietly his boots by the fire. And I will tell you the last of it, and then I am done. The service did not strike Tower Varn from the rolls. I saw to that as well. It was the last fight I had in me over the matter, and I won it, and I am prouder of it than of anything with my name on it. The post stands. It is kept again, not in strength. The realm is large and the post is small and far away, and that arithmetic has not changed, but it is kept by a young keeper, one at a time in turn. And the first thing each new keeper is told before he goes up, before the route and the provisions and the soft 4th step, is that there are 8 men in the snow against the western wall, and a 9th now beside them, and that the keeping of their ground is the better part of what the post is for. They go up knowing it. They keep the rectangles clear. They set their own button or their own knife at the head of the 9th grave, the way Crane set the 8, so that the line is not broken. I am old myself now, older than Crane was when I found him, and I think often of that lamp in the high window, and of what I believed it meant when I first saw it from the switchback in the pewter light, that either someone impossible had come, or the man we had given up for dead was, against all reason, still keeping his light. I have decided in my old age that both were true. Someone impossible had come, and the man was still keeping his light. The impossible thing and the faithful thing turned out to be the same thing, standing in the same window, and I have spent the rest of my life trying to be worthy of having seen it. The post is held. The post has been held, and up there above the snow line, where the wind comes off the ice fields with nothing in the world to break it, the ground stays clear, and the light still burns because someone is always watching for the lost to come home. And that, in the end, is the whole of what a kingdom is, and it is enough.